So let's get into it. Have you ever wondered if one day cold, hard cash will simply cease to exist? It's a reality that some say that we should accept. As more transactions are carried out via credit, online, on your smartphone, greenbacks and coins have become an inconvenience. Our guest tonight went a full year without using cash, with a few exceptions when it came to using public transportation or traveling abroad. But what are the serious concerns that we need to address? The questions we need to ask before we head into becoming cashless. What about privacy, corporate abuse, even larger divisions between rich and poor? And of course, the idea of electric grids going down. It's going cashless more dangerous than we think. Joining me to discuss it is David Wollman, author of the book, The End of Money, Counterfeiters, Preachers, Techies, Dreamers, and the Coming Cashless Society. David, thanks so much for joining us tonight. And so I guess, for starters, do you think that it's inevitable? Do we have to be? Are we going to be a cashless society?
Well, that's the question. I mean, we're quite close already, but what does that final mile look like? You know, cash is this incredible technology that's been with us for ages, but it hasn't really changed that much in a whole long time. And, you know, most of our financial lives are conducted in the digital realm now. And yet when you bring up this idea of going cashless to people, they really sort of recoil and they don't like the idea too much. So I wanted to explore that question a little bit. You know, what is it about cash that we cling to, and what are the costs of cash, to sort of do an honest accounting of whether it is worth trying so hard to keep it around.
All right, but can we also say that this is kind of what do we want to call it, like a first world argument, right? There are still a lot of people in this world that depend on cash, not having cash and having a credit card, being able to make all your transactions online or have something on your iPhone or whatever kind of smartphone you have. You know, those are luxuries. There are a lot of people in this world that need to have the physical cash in their hand.
Right, and in fact, I think it's the exact opposite. And this was something that was really revelatory for me when reporting out this book. But the reality is that cash is most punitive for the poor. And what I mean by that is, you know, you and I can toggle back and forth between electronic money and cash, kind of how we see fit. I imagine, you know, most of your wealth is not socked away under a mattress somewhere. But when you're
Don't tell anybody.
When you're poor, the cost of a bank transaction, you know, that's really punitive stuff. The cost of an ATM fee isn't just something to be annoyed at. And when your money is actually just in physical form, you know, it's subject to theft or destruction in a fire. And it's also extremely hard to save and build any financial stability in your life, so that any little shock, you know, a broken down moped, for example, you're just not buttressed against that. And so you can sort of be sent right back down into poverty. And that's why we're seeing a lot of this mobile money technology. In fact, it is kind of cool on an iPhone and for people in the West, and that's sort of the classist argument, right? Only you smartphone users are excited about this. But in fact, there's this huge push by the private sector, by governments, by nonprofits like the Gates Foundation. They're trying to encourage these technologies for using your mobile phone as a way to send money back and forth, or as a way to access banking. You know, not because it's gimmicky, but it's actually a life-saving tool.
All right, but so then let's talk about some of the other concerns that it might bring up, right? The issue of privacy, if all of your transactions could be monitored all the time. The issue that then, I mean, if we just look at the way the banks function these days, every time that you threaten them with a new a new regulation, they immediately start to enact new fees to try to make up for it and earn more money. And then if everything is online, what happens if all that crashes one day and then we have nothing to fall back on?
I actually think that last one is the best defense of cash at present. You know, I live out on the West Coast. We have our emergency preparedness kit for earthquakes, and, you know, the American Red Cross says you should have some small denomination banknotes in your kit there. But, you know, I wonder if 30 years from now, couldn't we all just sort of have Red Cross dollars stored in that kit in case the electricity grid is off for weeks and weeks, and that's what we transact in? Because the reality is we've mostly said yes to the digital money proposition already. And that's not to say that the concerns you raise about banks or about scrutiny from the credit card companies, let alone sort of capital P privacy, those are real and serious concerns, but they exist already today. And what's peculiar about the cash question, and actually showcases just how much we love this stuff, is that we seem to only really get most upset about these issues when we suggest, well, maybe cash is done. And people say, no, well, cash is an anonymous way to transact, and I don't want the banks or the government to know what I'm doing. Well, we kind of live in that world already. but people, it's almost like those latent fears are there, but they only sort of come suddenly to the surface when you say, hey, you know, cash is really expensive and old-fashioned. Are we sure we want to keep it around?
Well, I guess all the more reason to bring it up so we can realize that if we're heading in that direction, you know, perhaps there are some ways that we should consider that we need to approach it, some problems we need to solve beforehand. Really quickly, if you can just tell us, you know, you lived for a year without using cash. What was the hardest part?
The hardest part was going overseas to report this mobile money stuff I was mentioning. You know, I flew to India to go interview some guys like in the slums of Delhi who are using this mobile money technology. And, you know, before the plane even hit the ground in India, I realized, you know, I need to call a timeout basically on my cashless year experiment, because if you want to do anything in a developing country like that outside of your hotel room, you're going to need some paper money. And, you know, that was quite a stark reminder that although it might feel like cash is pushed far to the periphery of our everyday lives here in the States, you know, it's still really dug in its heels in poorer parts of the world.
Yeah, it's definitely, I have a feeling, going to take a while there. David, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
My pleasure.